This is the parish of Kilcash Kilsheelan, a rural part of South Tipperary, extending from the slopes of Slievenamon mountain through the villages of Kilcash, Ballypatrick, and down to Kilsheelan on the river shore, a place of conflict and community. All rural communities are like this. No other rural community is like this. The story of the farms and villages of the area at the beginning of the 20th century is told here through the camera lens of this man, John Quinn, a local farmer who was also an enthusiastic photographer. His images were taken at a time of immense political and social change as the country navigated the revolutionary period, and in the aftermath of years of conflict, build a new state. A century on, and while John Quinn's photographs of daily life are specific to Ballypatrick and district, many of the scenes could have been taken in almost any rural location in Ireland. Glimpses of war and revolution are caught, but more obvious is the daily routine of ordinary people going about their usual business, of going to school, delivering milk to the creamery, repairing tools and shoeing horses at the forge, tending to livestock. A contemporary poet captured John Quinn's photography perfectly. There is no moral to my song. I praise no right, I blame no wrong. I tell of things that I have seen, I show the man that I have been. His photographs offer a neutral perspective, capturing the reality of the time without judgment. They present a fascinating snapshot of a bygone era and give us clues as to how a community recovers from trauma and violence.
In the valley near Slievenamon.
Slievenamon is not only at the heart of this region, it seems to gather to itself much of the myth and mystery that connects us to our past, stories that reach us across time and can still touch us. Records from Kilcash National School in the 1930s school's folklore collection describe Slievenamon as a home of the Sidhe.
The mountain is also said to be a fairy mountain, as St. Patrick is said to have driven the fairies from their homes and sent them under the shelter of the hills and taken from them their magic power. Slievenamon is one of those mountains. On 2 nights of the year, they are free from his power and are able to roam once again the earth with all their old power. These nights are Ia Bealtaine agus Ia Sauna, so it is dangerous to be out on the mountain on either of these 2 nights.
One story behind the name of the mountain comes from the legend of Finn McCool's search for a wife. Unable to choose between the candidates, he organised a race up Slievenamon, with the winner being the chosen bride. Unfortunately, the winner, Grania, changed her mind at the wedding and used her speed to elope with a lad more to her taste, Diarmid, one of Finn's warriors. Coming forward in time, there's a mass rock on Slievenamon, a reminder of penal days when the Butler Castle in Kilcash often sheltered priests, particularly in Lady Ivy's time.
Near Carrickmaclear there is a stone called Clock on Affrin, where Mass used to be said in the penal days. There was a priest saying Mass at those times, and the soldiers were on their way. The Mass was said when the soldiers arrived, and there was a horse ready for the priest, and he went across the mountain. When he came to the Clobog, which is very deep, the horse tried to jump it, but failed, and the priest was killed. This spot is called Polan Taggart ever since.
The Butler family left an indelible mark on the parish, immortalised in the lament Kilcash.
Cadie made fast a gun onward, ta der and a gwil der lar. Neil troch der Kilcash na tailach, nee clean for a clean go bra. And I to the gunny condivan, for grow the miss mear harven knife. Be a cheerly egg tarring ter thin on Santa for an bin. the row.
This old castle of the Butlers, though now a ruin, still overlooks the stunning valley of the Shore. Carrickmokler, near Slievenamon, was the site of a battle during the 1798 rebellion. The rebels were defeated. The slopes of the mountain were heavily wooded and were often used as a hideout for outlaws and as a gathering place for white boys who were prevalent in the area in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. A favourite haunt was the Ballyknockhan Woods, hunting ground of the Butlers of Kilkenny Castle, Lords of Ormond. A newspaper of the 8th of May 1822 reported,
Clonmel, May 4th. On Wednesday last, a body of insurgents consisting of upwards of 200 persons, with white scarfs on their hats, attacked several houses in the neighbourhood of Kilcash and Ballyknockhan. They were almost all well armed.
Many of the victims of these attacks were tenant farmers rather than landlords. During the famine, a protest meeting attended by thousands was held on the summit of Slievenamon on the third Sunday in July 1848. Young Islanders Thomas Francis Maher and Michael Doheny spoke in protest against the export of food, reinforcing the point that Ireland was not afflicted by famine, but by a potato famine. There was plenty of food.
Ireland, an exporting country. The Cork Southern Reporter contains in its last number the following table of the estimated value of the articles of food shipped from the port of Cork alone to Great Britain between the 1st of December 1847 and ending on the corresponding day of the present year, and we are persuaded that the aggregate will fill most of our readers with absolute amazement if it does not stagger credibility itself.
In other words, the area was no stranger to strife and upheaval over the centuries. Indeed, in the early 20th century, even the Quinn farmstead in Ballypatrick is photographed with metal bars protecting the windows. During recent renovations, a wooden bar which slotted across the opening inside the upstairs windows was uncovered, and a metal safe was built into the old parlour chimney. Unusual features suggesting a need to protect the house and its more valuable contents. Again in the 1920s, the community on the slopes of Slievenamon was caught up in the events of the time. The area sheltered IRA men, saw burnings, arrests and deaths, and during the Civil War, brother fighting brother. But despite it all, the community endured and rebuilt. That's the thing about a community. It's energised by the ever-present tensions pulling it apart and drawing it together.
At the beginning of the Civil War, De Valera said in Clonmel, he had a meeting, he said, I'll turn father against son, he said, and brother against brother. You see, the Civil War did, it was bound to, sure. And families even divided them. And my uncle and my father, they couldn't agree either. And they'd be there, the uncle would come visiting, and they'd give the whole day arguing about nothing. And I remember I came in one day with the young fella and said, for God's sake, I said, will you go and do something? And he said, oh, what the hell did you do? You know, I wouldn't do it all. It was a waste of time, isn't it?
Up to the late 19th or early 20th century, when tenants were at last able to purchase their farms, apart from parish and community, a central relationship was with the local Ormond Butler estate, centred on Kilkenny Castle. It mattered who the landlord was and how reasonable was the agent. How much leeway was allowed when times were tough? Did signs of prosperity trigger a rent increase? Could you get a lease for your farm? How frequent were evictions? Some landlords were recent arrivals, having purchased estates after the Great Famine. Not the Butlers. Since they arrived in Ireland in the late 12th century, members of that family were lead players in the story of Tipperary, Kilcash being part of the area they controlled for hundreds of years. James Butler, 3rd Marquess of Ormond, succeeded his father in 1854 when he was all of 10 years of age. He lived long enough, dying in 1919, to see everything change. It's hard to imagine now, but he owned nearly 16,000 acres in Tipperary, and just short of 12,000 in Kilkenny. More to the point, he owned the 826 statute acres of Ballypatrick townland. It wasn't great land, and 30% was in the landlord's hands and forested. Tenant farmers had the chance to buy out their farms in 1906, first of the great changes that would occur in that century. Farming was the occupation of most of the rural population, and in 1926, over 60% of the Irish population was involved in agriculture. Like most rural areas of the time, life in the valley of Slievenamon revolved around community spaces, such as the local school and church, the post office, the pub, the creamery and the local forge. All are represented in John Quinn's photographs, and most buildings remain, though some have changed use over the 100 years or so since the pictures were taken. In 1893, while trying to secure a cooperative creamery for Ballypatrick, J.H. O'Donnell, owner of the existing creamery, wrote this description of the area which highlights the importance of some of these institutions.
"'Tis part of the Golden Vale. The village is on a crossroads, formed by the roads from Feathered to Carrick, and from Clonmel to 9 Mile House, Mullinahone and Callan. The short route over the hills is on the old road of Byankony's Coach. It has a large public house, the best country forge in any part, a post office and workers' cottages, and a never-failing supply of clean river water."
These places were important to a dispersed population who lived, worked, married, and died in the same area, all knowing each other and depending on each other with little need to travel outside the area for daily basics. Despite this, there were connections to the wider world at a communal level when politics forced choices between 1916 and 1923, and for families when circumstances forced emigration.
Everything has changed. Some of my friends went to England and they worked hard, and of course they came back and they thought they could buy houses, but they thought houses and land would be as cheap as it was when they left. If you stayed at home, of course, if you did something while you were doing it, it was there. But you see, if you built some house in England for someone else, and some of them never came back.
In the 50 years following the famine, the population of the area continued to decline, and in the Kilcash National School's folklore contribution, there are references to families leaving and names dying out.
There are 80 people living in Ballypatrick and about 18 families. Gibbs is the most common family name now. There is only one thatched house left now, the rest are slated. Houses were more numerous in former years than they are now. There are 12 ruins of homesteads in the townland. 10 of those are still known among the people. 2 of them are so old that they are forgotten among the people. In years gone by, people used to go to America and Australia looking for work.
John Quinn himself emigrated in 1908 to Derby in England, and then on to Australia in 1910, where he worked for Hancock Brothers near Melbourne, only returning home to take up the farm when his father died in 1915, something else that set Mr. Quinn apart in his community. Kilcash school registers record generations of local children. Primary school in Kilcash had been in existence since 1814, supported by the Kildare Place Society, a non-governmental agency, in a building provided by Lord Ormond. It later came under the national school system, still having the support of the Ormond estate. The schoolhouse had 2 single-storey classrooms for boys and girls, each with its own yard. Between them was a 2-storey house, living quarters for teachers. A new school was built in 1958, and today the old school building is a community centre. The Church of St. John the Baptist in Kilcash is just up the hill from the old school building. The original parish church was at Kilcash Castle, but when the Butler family abandoned the castle, the parish church was moved into the village. The present building was erected in 1885 on the site of an older church, and many of the Quinn family are buried there. The Ballypatrick Post Office, Gibbs Pub, Gibbs Forge and the Ballypatrick Creamery are also prominent in John Quinn's images. As well as being business premises, these were places that the farmers from the locality could meet, chat and catch up on gossip before returning to their daily work on their farms.
That was the first job you got, was going to the creamery with a donkey. And of course, people met at the creamery and you went into the shop to do all shopping and you collected their paper and it was a focal point. People came then every Friday to collect their pension and the older people, the women and the men met. And it was very nice.
The post office was a centre for news and communication. For example, this picture of locals reading the papers outside the door. It housed one of the few telephones in the village, and locals would have called in to send telegrams or make a phone call. In its different forms, Gibbs Forge has been part of Ballypatrick village since the 19th century. The forge was a hugely important service in an era of actual horsepower and continued in importance into the age of mechanisation. The gates at Quinn's farm were stamped with the Gibbs name and date, 1886. This is the original Gibbs Forge, still intact today with its vented roof and walls lined with racks of hand tools and old horseshoes, where men gathered to catch up while waiting for repairs and shoeing jobs to be done. The later forge was built in the 1930s by James, a son of William Gibbs, to take advantage of an ESB supply crossing his land. The photo shows the changing focus of power in farming, with a horse standing beside early engines. James Gibbs also opened a second forge in Kilsheelan, employing 5 master blacksmiths. Gibbs Pub at the crossroads in Ballypatrick, sometimes known as the Glue Pot, due to the reluctance of many of its patrons to leave the building, was a favourite stopping point on the way home from the creamery. It was a place to meet, relax and discuss local and regional events. Originally owned by O'Donovans, it transferred to the Gibbs family on the marriage of William Gibbs and Catherine O'Donovan in 1866. Like most families, many of their children emigrated. Today, the Gibbs owner of the pub lives in Canada. Ballypatrick Cooperative Creamery Dairy Society Limited, or the Creamery, as it was called locally, was founded in 1893 with James Quinn, one of the shareholders. By 1912, plans were afoot to relocate from the original leased building to a purpose-built creamery. This was built by Ned Walsh of Kilcash on land purchased by the Cooperative Society and opened in 1914. The building still survives. This is the interior of the building around 1918. In the early years, the creamery had the custom of giving separated milk and buttermilk free to the poor of the district, a practice commended by the secretary of the Irish Agricultural Organisation Society. The creamery manager of the time, Michael Butler, lived in the manager's house at the crossroads in Ballypatrick and owned the only car in the village in the 1920s. The house is still there today. The Quinn family came to Ballypatrick through the marriage of James Quinn from Durnan, a townland just inside the Kilkenny border, to Catherine or Kate Donovan of Ballypatrick. As the saying goes, James Quinn married into the Donovan farm. Before this 1869 marriage of James and Kate, rental receipts show the rent being paid to the Ormond estate first by Kate's grandmother, Catherine Donovan, and from 1858 by her son John, Kate's father. Then in 1876, James Quinn is delivering rent on behalf of his father-in-law, who died a decade later in 1879. James Quinn, the man from Kilkenny, took over the farm when his father-in-law died. A letter from the Land Commission, dated 21st July 1915, requesting James Quinn to pay his half-yearly instalment for the purchase of the farm, post-dates his death at the ripe old age of 83 in February of that year. After his father's death, John returned from Australia to take up the farm. From the famine onwards in Ireland, emigration was the route taken by many to give them better opportunities, often going out to family or friends who had left before them. The letters and postcards kept by the Quinn family shows this network. The dispersed family members ask after local news, comment on some of the headlines that reached them, and give news of family or friends. This is John Quinn, our photographer. He was 43 when the 1916 Rising happened. He saw life in Britain and Australia. His hobby and an extra income was photography. His photographs of his native place capture the everyday and highlight the farming life of the area. He also captured the end of an era, old ways such as communal farm working. This threshing at O'Gorman's farm shows the neighbours helping to get the harvest in. Thatched houses were already disappearing. horsepower, delivering milk to the creamery in churns, milking by hand, grinding meal in a quern for poultry. All of these were buffeted by change.
There are no thatched houses left in the village or townland now. O'Donnell and O'Reilly are common names, but some families that were prosperous in this district about 30 or 40 years ago, even less, are now extinct, and strangers have their farms.
Kilcash Kilsheelan lay in an important crossing point on the shore, with access to good cover in Ballynockan woods, so the area saw much 3rd Tipperary Brigade activity during both the War of Independence and the Civil War. Some of the most famous names of the period passed through.
My uncle, my mother's brother, he was out and he was a member of the IRA, and that was they were. They were fighting for Irish freedom. And of course, it was tough, they were great people. And he had a gun. Now, I don't know whether it was a rifle now or a shotgun. When he come home in the evening, he was a careless fellow like my brother. He'd throw everything any place. But he'd put his gun standing in the corner, like there, and he'd hang it over on it, you see. So the Tans raided the house, the Black and Tans, and they weren't nice people. They searched the house, they knew he had a gun, somebody informed them. But of course, they couldn't find it, and there was the gun in the corner, and nobody thought a simple way into it.
During early 1921, the creamery was closed by Crown forces, and a nearby creamery, Springmount, was burned by British troops in reprisal attacks. Staff at Ballypatrick endured a 2-day week. Locals say that a Manning boy from the school was used as a human shield by the Black and Tans. Perhaps one of the boys from this 1922 class photograph. The Dillon family is an example of one family who paid a very high price in the period of revolution. This family had lived in Kilcash for over 20 years, but were still considered blow-ins. Michael Dillon Sr. was a retired policeman who moved there from Wexford to take up a position on the Ormond estate around 1900. The children, James, Michael, William and Bridget, attended the local national school in Kilcash. Michael Jr. joined the British Army and by 1921 was employed by the post office in Clonmel. A witness statement from military records described how suspicions were aroused when a son of that family was overheard phoning his brother in Clonmel from the local post office about planned IRA activity.
We had friends in the post office at Ballypatrick, as well as at Clonmel, the receiving depot. Young Dillon, whom I have already mentioned, and who mixed freely and socially the night before with the column billeted with families in the Kilcash area, phoned from Ballypatrick post office to his brother, who was a postal clerk in Clonmel post office, informing him of the IRA invasion in the area that day. He at once phoned the British military in Clonmel.
An attack on the Dillon home resulted, and their 15-year-old sister, Bridget, was accidentally killed.
News reached Carrick-on-Suir on Sunday of a tragic occurrence the previous night at Kilcash. The house of Mr. Michael Dillon, an ex-policeman who was a caretaker in the employment of Lord Ormond, was attacked by armed men at midnight. The men, it is stated, called upon Mr. Dillon to come out and fired shots into the house. A daughter of Mr. Dillon, aged 15 years, who it is said was passing through the room to open the door, was struck by a bullet in the head and killed instantly. Mr. Dillon was stationed in Waterford City and County when in the RIC. The remains of the late Miss Dillon were interred on Monday at the new cemetery, Carrickbeg.
Their house, an old RIC barracks near Kilcash Castle, was burned and the family fled to Clonmel. A letter from old Mr. Dillon asking for John Quinn's help was sent when his youngest son was abducted during the Republican occupation of Clonmel.
6 Sarsfield Street, Clonmel, May 28, 22. Dear John, many thanks for your kindness. Mr. J.J. O'Shea, solicitor, has asked me to write to you to ask if you could possibly call to see him at his office in Clonmel on Tuesday next about 4 p.m. new time. He wants a word with you. I will be at his office at the above time and hope to see you there. A word from you now means a lot for Willie, a boy that have done nothing out of the way to anyone except himself. Yours truly, Michael Dillon, Mr. John Quinn.
The young man was confirmed dead some time later, and the remaining family moved to England, as many similar families did. With 2 of their children killed and forced to leave behind home and country, it is perhaps surprising that Michael Sr. chose to be buried beside his daughter in Carrick-on-Shore on his death in 1934. We don't know the fate of the rest of the family. During the truce, there was an IRA training camp in Kilcash, and in 1935 a schoolboy records a field at home which was a drilling field in black and tan days.
The following are the names of fields and streams on our farm. Park Road is so called because it is at the roadside. The High Field because it is higher than the rest. The Little Field because it is small. The Lawn Field because it is in front of the residence. The Long Field because it is long and narrow. The Glen Field because it is hollow. The Monair or Meadowfield. It was a drilling field in black and tan days. It is the border of 3 townslands and 3 landlords' estates. Brickmaking was carried on there once.
In the Civil War, the area was important as a line of defence for Clonmel against the advancing Free State Army. Much of the local IRA battalion work involved damaging infrastructure to prevent military movement, such as destroying roads, rail links and bridges. Kilsheelan Bridge was badly damaged, as was the railway station.
Shameful sabotage. Kilsheelan Station burnt. Railway cut again. Kilsheelan Station premises was fired last night by irregulars and consumed. Traffic is interrupted on this section. It appears a small party of armed men knocked up the station master shortly after 10 o'clock and ordered him out with his wife and children. A short time was given to remove furniture and effects, and a big proportion of these were saved before the irregulars set about their work of destruction. In a short time, the building was gutted. Not long ago, the signal cabin at this station was similarly destroyed. Line torn up. The line was also broken between Kilsheelan and Clonmel, near the former place. With the result, communication is again interrupted on this section.
These actions had a big impact on the farmers in the area, as livestock and grain were transported to markets in Dublin and Cork by rail. The news even spread as far as Cleveland, where Aunt Bridget writes.
August the 7th, 1922. My dear nephew, I write you these few lines to let you know I'm living still but getting weaker. I see last week a little item in the papers that there's a lot of trouble around you, that all the bridges along the shore was broke down. I think of all of you day and night. I hope all of my friends will come out safe with the help of God. Write soon and let me know how all of you are. Let me know if any of your brothers is in the fight. I will be praying for them. I will close for this time with love to all from Aunt Bridget.
Many families were divided in loyalties by the Civil War. An example is the O'Reillys of Ballypatrick Post Office, who had 2 brothers on opposing sides. Edmund was an officer in the Free State Army, while William, who scorched his name on a rafter in a farm building in 1921, when only 15 years old, was with the Republicans. Edmund died young in 1926. William attended his funeral and emigrated soon afterwards, like many others. William's first visit home was in 1955. The years of conflict had a huge impact on communities. For instance, the bridge at Kilsheelan took a long time to repair, as Republicans threatened to attack, and neither the Tipperary or Waterford councils seemed eager to take on the responsibility, all of which had some tragic consequences.
4 men, Larkin, Shea and 2 Whelans, were crossing the shore at Kilsheelan in a fishing cot on Christmas Day, when the little craft suddenly upset and the men were pitched into the icy waters and drowned. It is stated that 2 of the bodies have been recovered. The magnificent bridge at Kilsheelan was blown up by the irregulars about August last, and the little cot has since been used as a kind of ferry. The local authorities had a scheme for erecting a temporary bridge in hand, but as there was no guarantee that the structure would be allowed to remain intact, the work was not proceeded with. The tragedy has cast a gloom over the whole district, where the unfortunate victims reside and are well known.
However, life goes on and the community had to recover. Initially, they found the best way forward was not to talk about what happened and just try to rebuild and get on with it. The area settled down into the new reality. As in all parts of the country, families left or died out and new people took their places. Testament to the enduring nature of the community are the institutions and buildings that survived, with some still in use today. The creamery went from strength to strength and eventually amalgamated with Avonmore Creamery. Gibbs Forge built a new electrified workshop. The building is still standing, though the business has moved again, this time to a much larger modern building on the other side of the village. It's still owned and run by the same family. Gibbs Pub built a dancing platform which developed into a dance hall and still holds fond memories for older locals.
We bought the timber, and we had one of them was a carpenter, and we all got together and we made the platform, and we made it in Gibbs's yard in squares. And there was no such thing you had to have a licence, or we didn't want about insurance. So, I mean, if somebody fell, they get up again. It was fourpence to go in, you know. I mean, when you think of it now, and Sunday night was sixpence. And you know, it was hard enough to get them to bed. We employed local people in the band, and it was fine. And a Sunday night, if you're here on a Sunday night, afterwards you'd hear the music, you know. And old people going from, there'd be devotions in the church. And the old people come and they'd look in the gate, you know. And people coming home from England, they had some place to meet the rest of the people, you know. And of course, that's all gone. But again, maybe it didn't. Maybe that's because I'm not going out, so I don't know.
The old school closed in 1958 and is now a community centre. The post office closed in 2007. The Ormond Stores became the only local store and is also a pub. The Sure Blue Way passes by the still-standing Kilsheelan Bridge, where the repair work done by the army may be seen in the stonework. The photographs, like the community, remain almost silent on the subject of the huge events that passed over the area 100 years ago. But thanks to John Quinn, we have an enduring record of everyday life in a country parish at the beginning of the 20th century and a new state. John Quinn died in 1944. He lived in 2 Irelands, part of the United Kingdom with its Victorian values, and independent Ireland, seeking to make the best of hard-won freedom. We're grateful that something of a vanished world remains for us to see, thanks to the eye and lens of John Quinn, a man from Ballypatrick in the shadow of Slievenamon.
By the wave-washed shore, my restless spirit cries. My love, oh my love, will I never see you more? And my land, will you ever uprise? By night and by day, I ever pray, while only the time rolls on, to see our flag unrolled, my true love to unfold in the valley near Slievenamon, in the valley near Slievenamon.
by the wave-washed strand, and alone in a crowded hall. The hall, it is gay, and the waves, they are grand, but my heart is not here at all. It flies far away by night and by day, to the times and the joys that are gone. But I never will forget the sweet maiden I met in the valley near Slievenamon. In the festival hall, by the star-watched shore, oh, ever my restless spirit cries. My love, oh my love, will I ne'er see you more? And my land, will you never uprise? By night and by day, I ever pray, while only my life flows on, to see our flag unrolled and my true love to enfold in the valley near Slievenamon.